I'm Becky Finesse, the Rivers Trust Project Manager leading on the Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative project. Welcome to this webinar, which is one of a series that we'll be delivering through the Catchment Systems Thinking Cooperative project. This webinar is being recorded and it will be added to the CaSTCo YouTube channel so that you can look back on the presentation and share with any colleagues who might be interested. So just a housekeeping reminder to start with, that if you could keep your mic muted throughout the presentation and your camera off if you don't wish to be recorded, that would be appreciated. Today we'll be hearing from Toos from Earthwatch Europe, who will be introducing Earthwatch's Soil Health Toolkit and describing potential applications of that tool for our project partners who are looking at soil health within their project demonstration. In a moment, I'll hand over to Earthwatch so that they can introduce themselves and give that presentation. We'll then have 20 minutes of Q&A at the end, which I'll ask my colleague Simon Browning to facilitate. And if you'd like to pop any questions you might have as we go along into the chat, then feel free to do that, or you can save those and raise them at the end. So without further ado, I will hand over to Toos, and you should be able to screen share now.
Great, yeah, thank you very much. I will share my screen. Actually, while I do that, maybe Russell, I don't know whether I can call on you, but you can say a little bit about, yeah, we're a very active partner in CaSTCo and many parts of it, and it's great to be here and see so many of you. This is a much bigger turnout than I was expecting. So I don't know, Russell, whether you can chip in with a couple of things while I find the right screen to share.
Sure, thanks, Toos. Hi, everyone. I'm Russell Gold, Head of Policy and Science, and I work closely with Toos. Yeah, so Earthwatch is a citizen. Well, we're an environmental charity with science at our heart, and we focus on nature in cities, farming with nature, fresh water, and innovation. And I think Toos will give you a deeper dive into the nitty-gritty of our new farming with nature work.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I hope you can all see my screen like this and you can hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. Yeah, so as we're a very active partner in CaSTCo. I'm a part of the steering group and several committees, and I'm not directly involved in that work, although as SPI director I oversee all of it, but I've been mainly pushing our farming with nature work. As part of that, we've developed our Soil Health Toolkit, to be an additional tool in our citizen science toolbox next to our Freshwater Watch and some other tools we have. And we've already had quite a bit of interest from CaSTCo partners and demo cases on using it. So this is a great opportunity to show you a little bit more about what it is and what we're doing with it and why we've developed it. Before I do a deeper dive into that, very briefly, for those who don't know Earthwatch, so as Russell already said, we're an environmental charity with science at its heart. Our vision is a world where we live in balance with nature. And what we do is connect people with nature, motivate them to protect the environment and provide them with the knowledge and tools to make change happen. And citizen science is a very big part of that because it's an excellent tool to engage people as well as to create the data that we need to understand what is happening and what we can do about it. We have actually 4 big areas of work, which are nature in cities, freshwater, and agriculture, and then across that sits our innovation team, who work broadly on kind of advancing the science of citizen science. So within our cities work, you might have come across tiny forests that keep popping up all over the UK. We have more than 200 tiny forests planted now, especially in cities, and we have a whole program of work with local communities to plant them, but also monitor them and really connect with them, bring nature into all sorts of neighbourhoods. Naturehoods is another program in our cities area, which is about creating naturehoods in neighbourhoods, so bringing neighbourhoods together, getting people to collectively green their neighbourhoods and take some ownership and get some ownership over what happens in their neighbourhoods. And then within our cities work, we have a big piece of education, working both with schools and pupils. Green Our Schools is one of our newest programs, which is about greening school playgrounds with pupils. But we also have quite a bit of work in this area with young scientists and next generation scientists, and helping them to connect with communities and use citizen science tools. Our freshwater work is probably best known within this group, I assume. We have our Freshwater Watch citizen science tools, and we use those with community groups all over the UK, but also internationally, to really understand local issues and be able to do something about the problem, pinpoint where problems come from, and really do something about them. We've run water blitzes for a couple of years now, which is really a snapshot of what is happening in a certain area, and really helps to pinpoint some of the sources of pollution. And we do quite a bit of work across Africa using the Freshwater Watch Toolkit for monitoring SDGs together with the UN. And then within that area, we also have a number of research and innovation projects, and CaSTCo is one of them. Then agriculture, I won't go into much detail here because I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's a newer area of work and really builds on the freshwater work, but also bringing soil and biodiversity into it and working with farmers to really reinvent the way we farm and produce food, really. And then, as I said, innovation work, we particularly are involved in quite a number of EU-funded research projects, which are all about citizen science and citizen engagement in environmental issues and creating change on the ground and connecting research policy and practice. I'm assuming that many of you already know our freshwater team, so I thought I'll introduce the Farming with Nature team here particularly. In addition to me, that is Peter Huber, who is our research lead. He's based up in Scotland and recently joined the team. We have Michiel van den Berg, who's our senior program manager, coordinating all of the work in this area. He's based in the Netherlands. Foukje Steffen is our research manager on soil and water. She particularly has a soil background, and she's also based in the Netherlands. And Russell, well, you just saw Russell. He's our head of policy and science. So within our Farming with Nature program, the aim of it really is to support farmers and businesses and policy to reimagine the way we produce food. As I'm sure you all know, industrial farming, intensive farming is a big cause of environmental challenges, but at the same time, farming can actually be a force for good if we do it with nature and integrate it with nature. And what we're doing is working with farmers, with businesses, with policymakers to really start to understand where are the challenges and what can we do about it. And that often looks a bit like all of these stakeholders need to go through a bit of a cycle that looks something like this. It starts with, nah, there isn't a problem. I don't think it's true. It doesn't exist. To, well, maybe we need to do something about it. So at this first stage, this is a picture I took just around the corner from where I live. To most ecologists and to myself, this doesn't look like what I would want agricultural landscapes to look like. There's clearly a soil problem and a water problem. But a lot of the farmers around here don't necessarily see this as a problem and think it's absolutely fine. So it starts with recognizing what is happening and what the impact of practices are on the environment. And this is where our product, as we call it, Farming with Science, comes in. So we've developed a way of working where we really start with some collective fact finding with farmers. Let's just start with measuring what is actually happening on their farms, what are their impacts, and start to understand what that means and why it's important. And that helps with that transition from a phase of there isn't a problem to, oh yeah, actually I see that there is something that isn't quite working. But at that point, a lot of farmers feel very stuck in the system because the whole agri-food system is geared towards maximum production. It's quite hard to find alternative ways and actually have a proper business with that. And that's where knowledge exchange comes in. So here, this is where we bring farmers, policymakers, businesses, other stakeholders together and really have in the field supported by citizen science. So again, grounded in what is actually happening on the ground, bring them together and start to have the conversation about what do we need from each other and where are the blockers and what could we do about it in practice. Well, once we're there, then ideas bubble up about how you could do it differently and innovations that could solve some of those agricultural problems. But they need to be tested. And again, that's where citizen science can help to actually collect the data. And we've heard from a number of businesses that we work with that they really appreciate the citizen science method because it makes it much easier to understand the data. If you do very advanced science, you can have amazing data about new ways of working, new management practices you've implemented. But one of the big challenges is to upscale innovations across farms. And if the data are accessible, if it's easy for farmers themselves to measure these things, then it's much easier to get them on board and really get the change to be implemented at scale. And finally, if we've gone through this circle, we've tried some new ways of working. We know that it works and how we need to do them. Then we can farm differently. And there are already some amazing inspiration farms out there. And what we aim to do much more, this is the last one is a bit more of an aspirational part, but we're in many conversations where we really want to work with inspiration farms, with the citizen science data, monitor what is going on. So we collect the data on the evidence of what works in practice, but also support farmers who do it differently to learn and keep learning and engage others in that process and inspire others. And these inspiration farms can be an amazing venue for example, these knowledge exchange sessions. So in a nutshell, this is what our Farming with Nature program is about. So citizen science is an important part that underpins all of that. We've been doing citizen science with farmers for quite a while now. We really love it because it creates this level playing field between farmers and scientists for kind of fact finding and solution finding and integrating the data with what works in practice. But it's been great to hear some of the feedback we've had from the farmers themselves. These are just a couple of examples of what farmers tell us about what they like about using citizen science. At the top, Matthew's a farmer in Oxfordshire. He says, I wanted to take part in Earthwatch to see how our farming practices affect local water quality, as well as understand the overall health of water around the farm. Water quality is not always easy to see, so actually having some objective and scientifically robust ways of measuring it can help. Cathal is a farmer in Ireland who's done some amazing experiments on this farm, put in buffer strips and tried all sorts of things to improve water quality on stream that runs through his farm. And he says, I never saw myself as a scientist. I don't feel like a scientist. I don't feel qualified enough. But when I put citizen in front of it, no problem. So suddenly citizen science opens opportunities for experimenting and trying out new things that weren't really there before. And the last one is a dairy farmer from the Netherlands, Christine. She said, we have an impact on our environment. Regulations will become ever tighter. If we can demonstrate what we are already achieving, we can have a constructive conversation. Otherwise, it will remain a blame game. And where we find that we are having negative impacts, the data will help us understand how to improve these. I couldn't have put it better in myself, to be honest. It's exactly what it's about. It's giving the farmers ownership and agency and a voice in the conversation. So with our farming work, we built a lot on Earthwatch, which is a tool we've had for more than a decade now, and it's used in all sorts of projects. We've had over 50 scientific publications. It's been independently assessed by a number of institutions. The core parameters we measure are available nitrate, phosphate, turbidity, and a number of parameters around landscape context. We have it available in our Esri-based app and on the platform, and we use a group functionality, which means that per project we can slightly adjust the parameters. We can add new parameters. We have a core we want to use consistently. We know that that core is scientifically robust. It gives you reliable data, but we can add additional things depending on what the local needs are. App is available in 8 languages at the moment. and we have quality checks and automated feedback operating, so we know that the data are good quality, but also that as a participant, as soon as you upload a data point, you get instant feedback that says this data point shows that the water quality here is poor, moderate, or good for these and these reasons. So that was our starting point. But with the projects we were doing with farmers around water, soil kept coming up as a really important topic. There's so many connections between water and soil. I guess that's exactly why we're here today in this webinar. Soil health is really key in agriculture, but actually it's a really big issue in cities as well, and for water quality. Although we started to develop this tool for our agriculture program, we're using very similar things in our tiny forest project, for example. A couple of years ago, when we started with this, soil health was, well, people talked about it, but not very much and not very concretely. But suddenly, in the last couple of years, it's really gone up the political agenda as well. The EU is working on a soil health law, so it's becoming very relevant. We had a look at existing tools. There are quite a number of existing tools around, but we found that most of the tools we could find were either expensive, or they required quite a lot of prior knowledge, or they were relatively narrow in what they assessed. So we looked at what would be a very, very basic minimum of measurements that everyone could do, that's really easy, and that gives you at least a bit of a feel for what is going on and what the challenges are. So that's what we developed. The protocols were developed in 2020 and onwards, and at the beginning of this year, we launched our app, and it's now fully functional, and it's being used in a number of projects across 9 countries at the moment, including in the UK and in the Netherlands. So what does it entail? The basic parameters we look at are these 5 things. Soil texture, so whether it is loamy, sandy, etc. Infiltration rate, so how quickly does water infiltrate into the soil? And we have a very advanced piece of kit, which is some PVC piping with some additional innovations to it to measure that. Soil color, which is related to organic matter and carbon content. Earthworm density, which where we also look at functional groups of earthworms, so the 3 key earthworm groups. And then vegetation cover, which is not so much a result of soil health, but it really affects soil health, particularly over winter. So what does a typical soil health project look like? There's a preparation phase, which is really about being crystal clear about what the objectives of the project are. How does that connect with motivations of, for example, local farmers who take part? Who are the participants, making sure we have them on board? Then co-designing the monitoring plan. Where and when do we need to measure to answer the questions we have in that specific project? As I already said, there are options to add parameters and add specific context. And we also have a number of projects where we combine this with our Earthwatch water quality monitoring. Then people get sent their kit, which you can see on the picture, and we do field training, so actually doing all the measurements together in the field once. Where possible, we can do it online, but it's always better to actually try it out, and then you can see what practical questions people have and answer them there and then. We also use a train-the-trainer model where we train a number of project leaders who then train their participants. Then the monitoring campaigns start. We usually measure soil health data either in spring or in autumn. In some projects, we do both spring and autumn, so twice a year. And it takes about 20 to 30 minutes per sampling point. On farms, we actually noticed that the thing that takes most time is walking from one sampling location to the next, and getting all your kit together, etc. So it doesn't take up a huge amount of time to take these samples. And we have the app for easy data entry in the field, which you can upload there and then, or upload later if you don't have a mobile connection. We have a data viewer. We just last week, so this is very fresh off the press. We've launched our Farming with Nature platform, which is one place where we will bring water soil and biodiversity, well, I'll come to that, data together in one place for farmers where they can see all their data from one farm. And as part of the project, it's really important to not just do the measurements, but also make sure there are plenty of opportunities for especially groups of farmers to learn from each other, to exchange what they've learned, to discuss what it means, and with Earthwatch scientists discuss the results of the measurements. So often we have a kind of halfway through the year, we have a session where we come back and discuss, and then, for example, after a year, have another session to reflect. A couple of things are still under construction. As I said, with Freshwater Watch, we have this instant feedback. So as soon as you upload data, you get a message, a pop-up message that says what your data mean. We don't have that yet for soil health, but we're working on having at least an initial response there. And the other exciting thing we're working on is what you can see on the picture here is our info sheet. Is a card, is a kind of automated report, basically, on a farm level, reports back your results. Again, this can be integrated between our different toolkits if people use more than one. I'll go through this pretty quickly, but it's we have the app, which just makes it as easy as possible to do the field measurements. So it has GPS, etc. already integrated. This is our Farming with Nature platform, so all the data in one place, as I already said. And this has this group functionality. So if you're part of a specific project, you can log into your group and see all the data from your group. You can have a look at it. It's we haven't distributed this link yet because I'm sure there are still some snags we need to work on. But yeah, it's there, and the data integration functionality will be added in the next couple of weeks. Very brief kind of sidestep. In addition to water and soil, we're also currently working on a simple biodiversity protocol for farmers. So we have a project together with Wageningen University, PepsiCo, and a number of other partners, where we're developing a really simple, easy, basic module for farmers to measure, particularly pollinators, soil invertebrates, and birds on their farm. One of the things we're testing is a tractor survey of birds, because a lot of, certainly in the Netherlands, most farmers have kind of completely GPS controlled tractors, so they sit in their cabin and don't need to do anything. So that's a very good moment to actually look at birds and do your survey. So what does this look like in projects? A couple of examples. We have projects specifically focusing on farmers. They follow the process I just outlined. In these cases, we always work with groups of farmers because the peer learning, the learning from each other, is a really important aspect of this. Farmer clusters are a really good example of how you could do this, but we operate in different countries, in different contexts. It's important that these projects really tap into the interests and the questions of the farming community. What are the things they're stuck on? What are their interests? And then kind of make sure that the research addresses that as well as any other kind of wider stakeholder interests are there. And this is really about creating a safe space. So one of the most important things, as Earthwatch, we are all for fair data. We always share our data open access wherever possible. But actually in these projects, it is about giving farmers an opportunity to learn in a safe environment. And therefore, it's really important to, at the start of the project, really agree who's able to see the data, for what reasons, when, etc. So often we restrict the data. Often farmers are quite happy to share the data with each other, with the other farmers in the group. But initially, we often don't share the data further than that, just to give them an opportunity to learn. And then once projects kind of, if they continue and then grow and mature, sometimes they say, actually, we do want to have them open access because we want to be able to use those data in our conversations with the Environment Agency or other agencies, for example. But it's really important to start at the right level for where the farmers are at that point in time. And as I already said, building in time for facilitated learning and discussion is super important. And where possible, it often starts with just this kind of fact-finding mission, just kind of understanding where we are and bringing everyone on the same level. And then from there, you can slowly work towards, okay, but where do problems really come from? How do they arise? What could we do differently? Experiment with different ways of working. And often farmers quite quickly have ideas of how they could do it differently, but often they're a bit stuck in the system. So it's also about how can we create a funding model around that, for example, through payment for ecosystem services that enables farmers to do it differently. We also have a range of projects where we work directly with big companies. Taking Lyle is one example, where in this case in China have experiments to reduce the impact of stevia farming, well, the environmental impact overall, but particularly also the impact on water quality. So we use our citizen science tools in those ways. We also have a big project on soil health with another company, but at the moment I can't share the details of that yet. But it works in very much the same way, of actually with local farmers and local researchers, or sometimes farm advisors, setting up a controlled experiment with control plots and plots where we implement some a different way of management, and then measuring the results, discussing them, and using that to upscale innovations. This one I'll probably go through quite quickly, but in the Netherlands we have a very exciting project where we work directly with a regional government. We've implemented a payment for ecosystem services policy regime, and we've used the Soil Health Toolkit as well as Earthwatch and some of the biodiversity surveys to really measure whether it has the impact we wanted to have on the ground and how we could work better with farmers around this. And then finally, we also use the Soil Health Toolkit with communities, and one example of that is in a blitz style. So in this case, in one weekend, we invited, in this case, it was a completely new build area where the construction company had taken a lot of care to make it as environmentally friendly as possible. And they said, we leave the soil health in a better state than it was before we built our neighborhood. And we said, that's great. Now we want to measure it. So we did a blitz with the local community and measure as many locations as possible in one weekend in this area. And we want to follow that up year on year to see how it develops over time. In this case, it's not, the soil health is not yet in a better place as where it was before the houses were built, because we sampled 16 locations on a very, very rainy day and found a total of 4 earthworms. But in terms of the education elements of most people in that area had never thought about soil health in their gardens and in the neighborhood, and why it was important, and what that meant for flooding events, etc., for example. So it was really, really valuable to getting insight in that. And then a final project I want to mention is Benchmarks. It's one of those big EU projects with 28 partners from 21 countries. So a bit of a nightmare to manage, but we're a partner in it. And Benchmarks aims to create a consistent soil monitoring framework for the EU that is also very much feeding into the new EU soil law that is coming up. And we're the citizen science partner in this a big project partnership. And one of the things we're doing within this is a big review of all the citizen science toolkits around soil health that are out there, and looking at what impacts they have and potentially have, and kind of benchmarking our own tools against that as well. So that's just as a quick aside, but if you want to know more, have a look at the Benchmarks website, because there's a lot more detail there. That's my presentation. So I guess that's in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go too fast with all of this. But yeah, very much looking forward to questions, and I'd be very curious to hear whether you feel this could be of value to any of the demo cases.
Great, thank you too. So that's really, really interesting. So if you've got any questions, perhaps if you could put your hand up and I'll come to you, or type it in the chat, and we'll run through them in order. There's one in the chat already, which is from Jane. What is the Soil Health app called, and can anyone download it?
So it's on the ESRI 123 survey app. So you can download the app, but you need to be part of a specific project on our platform to be able to see the specific survey.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, that was a question I had earlier on, but I think you pretty much answered it, and you've reinforced that there. So it's not so much for individuals to kind of sign up to and go out and test their local park or their garden and feed data in a bit. It's more like specific groups and clusters with a purpose that you're aiming at.
Yes, so it's always there always needs to be a local project that you're part of. It could be that if anyone's interested in creating a project that invites people to measure anywhere in it, for example, a blitz style, then that's absolutely possible. But because we customize it, and because for us, it's really important that the data are used at its proper citizen science. So therefore, it's not something that's open to everyone at any time.
I haven't got any hands up yet. So a question I have then is, if someone wants to get involved, possibly a single farmer or a farmer who has a group of friends who'd be interested, what is the cost to them of kind of getting you down to do training and all that kind of thing?
That's a very good question. It depends slightly. So the way we set this up is, and especially within the Farming with Nature program, we not going to say will never, but it's not our aim that farmers individually pay for this, because we feel there's quite a commitment that they need to commit to actually collecting the data, thinking about it, learning, and that often works best if they don't also have to pay, because then they quite quickly have all sorts of expectations that kind of it's passive and it's just given to them, and that's not how this change cycle works. So we can have a very kind of the simplest type of project, which if there is a group which is very self-led, then we could set it up relatively simply. There is a cost involved in just the kit and setting people up on a platform. That's not a huge cost. It depends on quite a number of things, so it's quite hard to say a number, but say for £1,000 a year you could set up a group and just do individual, kind of do your thing. Most projects that we currently have are a bit more involved. They have a bit more time from our side, from scientists, to actually help with the data interpretation, because data collection is one thing. Where it really adds value is if the data are interpreted and it's clear what they mean, and that just takes time, that data analysis, even if the reporting is automated as much as possible. And then there's the part of the engagement part, setting up the meetings, setting up the training, having events where farmers come back and actually discuss together. So we have a couple of projects now where we've set up a sort of a train-the-trainer model, where we train others in that whole process and support others in that process. But it's done by them. And just very roughly, that kind of one of those projects is about £15,000, for example. So that gives you a little bit of an order of magnitude.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting, because there might well be people on the call who will be thinking about taking this on at maybe like a catchment partnership level or a management catchment level, to see how you can kind of adjust those scales and go from single farms or clusters up to catchments. Okay, Jane's hand is up now. Jane, would you like to unmute? Can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
This might be a really silly question, but do you have to be a farmer, or does it have to be on a farm, or could these samples be taken in parks and other places nearby rivers or within the catchment?
They can be taken anywhere. So no, you don't have to be a farmer. So the Farming with Nature program is aimed at farmers, but even there we use it with policymakers and with bank employees, for example, because they have a role to play in the farming system as well. But the last example I gave of the project in a new built neighbourhood, those were just families, the people who just moved into those houses who took the samples. So that's very, very possible. Yeah.
Okay, so any group of people could get together and decide they wanted to make a commitment to doing this on a regular basis. They could contact you and get set up as a project.
Yes, they could. For us, it's about using those data to create agency and create change. So we'd like to see what the purpose of the measurement is. Why do we want to monitor it, and what comes out of it? Because from experience, we also know that having those purposes really clear is a really important part of people's motivation. So if it isn't clear what the data will be used for, then people will do it once and then not come back because they've done it and they move on to other things. So that is an important piece to have in place, and then we set up the project around that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I've got another question, if that's okay. Were there any tests that didn't quite make it? So, there's nothing in your soil testing about nutrients or chemicals in that sense. Yeah, are there any tests that you thought about but didn't include in the final package?
Many, yes. No, we tested a very long list of potential tests. There are also some that are on our list of additional parameters that you can add. So one that is particularly in grasslands, for example, is quite a useful one. Is struggling for because I've had most of those discussions in Dutch, so I'm struggling for the English word. But it's kind of about root depth and how much root mass there is. So that's one we're looking at adding in some projects. There are some projects where we've added nutrient measurements. For example, we're looking at methods kind of really, because preferably we have really simple field methods that give you the answer there and then in the field, and that don't require any lab measurements. We have some projects that combine this toolkit with more extensive lab measurements to just give you a bit more depth to it. But actually observing it in the field and seeing what is happening and seeing what the landscape around that is often the thing that really creates the click of, okay, but now I understand why this is the patch where I also always find this or this, or it's just rained, there are puddles everywhere, that explains X, Y, Z. So it's that field piece that's really important. And at the same time, we want the data to be really robust and make sure that they might be rough, but at least they're accurate. That's important for us. So yeah, there's a wide range of things you could add. The other element is it, and this is in those co-creation sessions, a big pitfall that we experience again and again is on paper and in discussion, people always, oh, but I'm also interested in this, and I'm also interested in that. But the more you add, the more time it takes, and therefore the less motivated people are to do it again. So we found that less is more is really true in this case.
Yeah, I think we certainly find that in water quality testing as well. The more parameters you add, and some people are really keen to test everything they possibly can, it also complicates the data analysis by a huge amount. You're looking at those different relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And dependencies and things. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you ask people to measure things, they then have the expectation, for good reasons, that you will analyze all of those data. So saying, we'll measure all of this, we'll analyze a little bit in the first instance, and then we might have these other things we can go into if we want, if we need to or we want to. In practice, that is not really acceptable, I guess, for most audiences. So, and trust building is a really important part of all of this.
Okay, I've just got one more question, then I'll leave you alone. Have you got any examples of how you've turned this into action? So farmers have collected the data, you've gone through the kind of the creation of the monitoring programs, they understand the objectives and all that, they get the results, and then what do they tend to do, and how do you facilitate that? Because sometimes there might be environmental grants that they can apply for. Do you help with that? Or is it done at kind of their cost? They're so enthused by the data, they just go out and do it anyway. And what sort of things, changes have happened?
Yeah, it's quite a wide range, and it's always something that at the start of a project we try to have a little bit of a kind of looking forward to what that might look like and what we need to put in place. In many cases, we work together with local groups of existing farmer clusters, or in the Netherlands we have a project with basically the farmers union who support their farmers. So we often make sure that we have the stakeholders already in place who can help to pick up some of those things. We've quite often found that farmers come across quite simple things that they can do differently. So they go, oh, actually, I hadn't noticed. So for example, with water quality, we had a really nice example where, because of the measurements, a farmer found out that the trainee he had on this farm had spread manure right, well, basically almost into the ditch. That wasn't supposed to happen, but the farmer said, if I hadn't measured and I hadn't suddenly found spikes in my nitrate and phosphate data, I wouldn't have known, and I couldn't have had, and now I've had the opportunity to have the conversation with this lad, and he will now do it differently. So there's some really direct impact in terms of small things. In one project, we worked together with a regional water board in the Netherlands, and the data gave us insight into where the challenges are, and we're now in conversation with the farmers and the water board to really look at what measures could be taken, and who would need to fund them. Is there some things that the water board might be able to do something about? So in the Netherlands, we have specific water taxes, which are administered by the water board, and they can give a discount on certain taxes if certain measures are taken, for example. So there's some direct policy opportunity there to implement bigger change.
Cool, that's really interesting, because, and then I'm thinking then, in this country, some of those schemes that would be administered at a sort of regional level or local level might well be interested in funding the project in the first place, and then they're on the receiving end when the sort of the grants applications for changing practices comes in after the data.
No, I think that's super interesting, and I think the whole kind of ELMS and payment for ecosystem services. I must add, since I've moved back to the Netherlands from the UK, I'm a little bit out of touch with what the latest is in that, and I'm hearing different things about how developed or not it is. But I think that principle creates a lot of opportunity for this, because this gives farmers direct insight in what they could do to create some of those ecosystem services. So it could be integrated in a project like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a question from Kerry.
Thanks, Simon. Really interesting presentation and helpful conversation. Thank you very much. Do you have, through the work and the projects that you've already run, do you have data on how long it's taken a farm to go from one stage of soil health to another? Do you celebrate that in any way? Just thinking about going the next step to the positives as well as the rest of it.
Yeah, really, really good question. I'm afraid we haven't run the soil health piece long enough to really see that. We have some project with Earthwatch where we've really seen a change over time, but also in many cases, farmers can make some there's some quick wins they can do themselves, but then bigger change is kind of tied up into how payments work or how profitable certain things are, and therefore kind of the squeeze on margins, and it becomes quite technical and financial in that sense. So on soil health, we haven't run this long enough to really have farms that have turned around completely from kind of intensive degraded soils to kind of regenerative, and but I'm hoping to see that in the next couple of years, and absolutely celebrating that and sharing that, and that's where those inspiration farms that are there that comes from. I think there is really a growing appreciation among farmers about how important this is. From the conversations I have with many farmers, both in the UK and the Netherlands, there's really a bit of a shift in terms of they are now much more open to kind of actually things need to be done differently, but they're quite stuck. And if you can come and kind of stand next to them and help them with, first of all, just fact finding, because everyone lives in their own bubbles, and a lot of farmers hear what they hear on a daily basis quite different from what I hear on a daily basis, and therefore just kind of stopping and objectively finding out where you stand is a very important first step, and then from there we can go on that journey together. So yeah, I hope that in in a short while I can give you a more concrete answer, but we haven't gone that far yet, but are on the way.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any more hands. If you have a burning question, now is your chance, or you can, I'm sure, I mean, your details were on the presentation, so we'll be making this recording available. If you've got any questions for Toos or any of us here, then we can pass them on. Okay, so I propose we finish there. Thank you very much, Toos, and the Earthwatch team. That's been really brilliant. Really useful
well, thank
stuff.
you very much. Yeah, great to see so many of you. And if you want to know more, if you want to discuss a specific opportunity, or we're also very happy to work on the value for money propositions or whatever, please do get in touch either with me directly or with any of the freshwater team, and we'll take it from there. So great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toos. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.